That's right, I'll talk about this one.
I think you're in there, Jim.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I relate.
Just say.
Now, there's a wonderful German writer called Sebald, W.C. Sebald. Have any of you ever heard of him? He wrote The Rings of Saturn. He wrote The Immigrants. He was a German author who migrated to England. And he was obsessed by the Holocaust. And so all of it, you remember that during the Nazi period, a lot of the Jewish children were shipped out of Germany and over to Britain. They were schooled in Britain. And so a lot of his stories have to do around that magnificent writer. I highly suggest you look into reading him. And he, in the Rings of Saturn, in the second chapter, I came across this statement: time itself grows old. All we wish for is to be forgotten. And to me, it just haunted me. And I didn't have the slightest idea what I was going to do with this. But at the time, I was doing another carving, and it had a raven skull in it. And the model I used for the raven skull was the actual raven skull I had. And I happened to just one day put it in a Japanese jar that I had. And I looked at that and said, yes, there it is. There it is. Time itself grows old. All we wish for is to be forgotten. So that's the genesis. That's how an idea percolates. See, I think the next one's the House of the Owl.
Oh, the House of the Owl.
You missed the House of the Owl.
Oh, that's not on our list.
I think we have two different lists, Mr. Sabin.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
An unlikely story.
You know, us Bendites aren't always that friendly. All right, this is a cool one.
Now, I've done a number of carvings related to night over the years, one of them being, you know, the Welsh poet, he's just not coming to mind right now. He wrote, "Do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dark, coming of the dark."
Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas.
No, yeah, or Dylan Thomas, right. I was fascinated by that idea. And in the book on my work, you come up with a picture of it. And another one, which I don't have a picture of to show you, is called Night Comes on Silent Wings. It's an owl flying, pulling a boat with a recumbent owl in it. So I love to explore the theme of night. It relates to darkness, light and dark. And so I've done a number of pieces over the years with entity within entity, the spirit within the belly, within the being. And so this is sort of a play on that. And I just thought about the House of the Owl. What is the House of the Owl? The House of the Owl is the universe.
Wow, that's pretty.
I have it on this little turntable. So you can look at it sometimes from that way, and sometimes you can look at it from this way. You know, I don't know when you have works of art, particularly sculpture, if you like to move them around, if you like to look at the angles and so forth. But that's what this is about. Okay. You know, Now, some of you may know that I do collaborative work with Peter Wright, who's a marvelous glass blower. And we do either pieces I call stopper tops, which are little birds and so forth at the top, or sometimes more major pieces like this. Now, Peter's having a show at the Contemporary Gallery here. It's opening, and I strongly suggest you go because it's a beautiful show. And with the two other artists who are also here, I believe.
Yeah.
And now this idea comes, straightforward from Egyptian canoptic jars. Canoptic jars were for the burial of royalty or the pharaoh, particularly, where the entrails of the various entrails of the deceased were put in jars. And traditionally, you had horse the hawk, a human, or baboon, I forget what the fourth one is, but there were always 4 canoptic jars. And I could go into that, but for this time span, I won't. And so what I came up with, and Peter and I collaborated on, was the idea that the canoptic jar becomes a spirit jar. That the jar holds the spirit of the entity on the top, which is, in this case, golden eagle. And so, again, I strongly suggest you go to the Contemporary Gallery because Peter's work is marvelous. Okay, so that, yes.
So if you take the head off,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
so if you take the head off, does the spirit come out?
That's up to you. It's in there. Okay, so any questions, statements of faith, or?
You use juniper wood, but it's a different than
It's
our,
called
our
alligator.
juniper.
Alligator juniper only grows, or mostly grows in southern New Mexico. If you know the area around Silver City in the southwest corner, just before you get over the border to Arizona. And it's called alligator juniper because the bark looks like alligator skin. And it's a much better, like you here, you have the 3-berry juniper, it's all over the place. But particularly you have allergies, are aware of it. And,
Yeah.
but down there, this wood grows much more slowly than the juniper that you know, which usually branches out from the ground. The alligator juniper usually grows about 6 feet as a tree trunk and then branches.
So it's more dense?
It's more dense. It's much less likely to have dry rot in it. A lot of juniper, if you cut it, the core is dry rot. And it's a very hard wood. And I used to carve with the same kind of juniper you have around here. I was always frustrated because I have all these branches growing out of the ground. It's very hard to get a large piece. And then when I was driving, my daughter lives in Tucson, so I would go down through Silver City and down to Lieutenant, cut over to Tucson, and I discovered this wood. And so one time I took a hand saw and I went and cut some pieces and tried it out, and it worked. So, yeah, it's alligator juniper.
And then your transition, we started talking about this, but your transition from a painter to a sculptor, and you had an interim there where you weren't doing either of those. And what kind of aesthetic or did you bring from painting to your work
Well,
as a sculptor?
okay, first of all, I've been talking to these folks here so they know a little of my history to fill you in. I was a painter. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and I was a painter. I was had to teach because I was married with a young child. And so that period was my first part of my life. I was a very successful painter. I mean, I was in a number of galleries and so forth. And I was involved at the very end of that time, but really the spiritual. I was very interested in the feminine form particularly. And a lot of my work with the women floating in air and dream states. But I went through a number of periods. I was influenced by abstract expressionists. I loved Mark Rothko and people like that, Diebenhorn and others. And then around 1980, we were in the midst of the Cold War. And there was always part of me that wanted to be a social activist. But I couldn't see, I didn't want to become like the Russians. I didn't want to become a social realist. You know, that didn't affect me at all. So for 10 years, I put away my paintbrushes. I got involved with the peace movement. And that led me to leading peace groups, to the Soviet Union in Iraq, the Soviet peace groups, all propaganda, as I look back on it, but nevertheless very important to me at the time. And then I said I wanted to become more focused. And so I thought, well, there was this organization called Sister Cities International, which some of you may know about. So I joined that, and I headed up a delegation from Santa Fe to Bukhara, Uzbekistan, and where we became Sister Cities. Now it's interesting because Santa Fe was on the old Santa Fe Trail. Bukhara was on the Silk Road. Now, there's hardly a comparison. But anyway, that was part of the gist of it. Then in 91, when the Soviet Union fell, that was it. You know, the Soviet Union, Sister Cities International, became very sexy during the Cold War. A lot of cities joined up with Soviet cities. Portland had and Seattle had, for instance, sister cities in the Soviet Union. So it was that's a whole story in itself. But then when I came back, I was going through a divorce, and I was really pretty ragged on the edges, and I started whittling, just carving for myself. You know, I was going through this period of shamanism where I was very interested, so I was carving these implements. Well, people began to want to buy them. And so that was my entree back into the art world. And then you see I've moved quite a bit beyond that. But does that answer your question? But I did have a spiritual component in my painting, particularly toward the end. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, there seems to be an absence of feminine work by you. It's always very strong, masculine. Is that purposeful?
well, I
or
think
just
that
totally
the
missing?
window I could conceive of part of it is feminine, and the little three figures there, the bound figures,
The
there's
one
a
on the right
feminine
is more feminine.
energy in there,
Okay,
and
let's bring this in.
I'm about ready to embark on a whole new series. I've been actually dialoguing with several women, and I've become fascinated by the male-female component of life. And so I'm going to start doing a whole series, and there will be, some of the work might be rather explicit. I don't know. You know, sometimes when you're going to explore things, you have to think, can the gallery sell them?
Sure.
You know, and so, but that is percolating in my mind. And I have done, where is it? Do you have the book?
Can you hand me one of those books?
it's a good point to bring up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scroll through. It may take a minute, I'm sorry. I don't see it.
Thinking of the woman in the blue robe?
Here it
There
is.
she is.
This one's called The Robe of Inner Silence.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And this is from a, I forget his name right now, but a Portuguese, wonderful Portuguese writer. And just, it's, came up this statement, The Robe of Inner Silence. So I immediately got my partner out in a bathrobe, and began sketching her. And you'll notice that as the robe opens, there's an owlish figure peering out. So, there's a feminine name. And then there's another one.
The Cora head figure.
You know, a lot of these are gender neutral. You know, they don't, can be female. For instance, this one, you know, could be male, could be female. You know, the boat almost has a vagina shape to it.
Did you do that intentionally?
What?
Did you do that intentionally?
Again?
Did you do that vagina shape intentionally?
I was aware of it. I used the boat shape. I will do things in the future that are much more explicit.
Okay.
But still, you know, in the guise of boat shape with maybe a little. I hope this isn't an embarrassment to anybody. Well, I don't know if I can come up with the other one or not. Maybe we can talk afterwards, I'll show you. It's an image of a woman seated, very much like the Egyptian sculptures of seated figures, only she's sort of encased in the structure, and she's holding an owl. And an owl, of course, is a very feminine. An owl is associated with Athena, it's associated with female wisdom, and so forth. So I've done pieces like that.
All right.
But I don't usually think of, well, I mean, the stuffed man is a man. Is a man, is a man, is a man. And these are, here's a feminine figure right here, the white raven. And very often when I'm working on these pieces, I don't think of gender. I think of idea. Sometimes they're explicitly not. Like this little one I had a lot of fun with. It's called A Fat Little Owl for Hand Holding.
Yes,
Hold it.
that's wonderful. I know.
Now that's a feminine,
Yeah.
if that isn't a feminine
It's
statement.
lightweight. What is this, just all wood then?
That's juniper wood.
Not, it's not been cast. It's lovely.
Anybody else want to hold her?
Is it for sale?
If you would like to purchase the.
I mean, at some point, even I'm
talk to me.
Anybody else want to hold it?
It's lovely.
Tim, there's a piece in this collection that I probably get more questions about than almost any of the others. And I'd like to bring it up and just have you tell us a little bit about it. I know we've talked about it
The
before.
scarecrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The Scarecrow.
Oh, yes.
This is one of the most talked about works in our gallery.
Okay, now, 3 graces. feminine.
Yeah, yeah.
3 graces. feminine. So you see, I'm not a misogynist.
Oh, no.
All right, now this is a very interesting one. I was in Seattle for an opening at my works at Stonington Gallery. And I went to SAM, Seattle Museum of Fine Arts, and there was this fantastic show. It was about a Jewish ghetto of logs in Poland during the Second World War. And these Jews were cordoned off, barbed wired off into a ghetto, very much like the Warsaw Ghetto. And the Nazis always said that they were treating them well, they were involved with cottage industry for the regime, etc. Well, they were starving them to death. Or Auschwitz was 30 miles down the road by rail. And there was this Jewish photographer, he worked for the local paper, had 2 Leicas, and he secreted them, and he went all over the ghetto. And he put together this amazing statement about what actually happened. Now at the end, luckily he never ended up in Auschwitz. He managed to survive, and what he did, he buried all the negatives in a lead box, put them underground, and once, of course, the Soviets emancipated them. And they dug up this box. Excuse me, I have a phone act and it's tied into my cell phone.
You got your cell going.
Yeah, it'll stop in a minute. And then they printed all these negatives and made an exhibition out of it. Well, one of the photographs was of a scarecrow. Now, I don't know if you know the Eastern Jewish clothing, but the men used to wear very large, like Irish caps, only much bigger. And it was the scarecrow. Why a scarecrow? Because the community was being starved to death, so they started victory gardens, what we call it, victory gardens, and to survive. And one of them was a scarecrow, and I saw that. And do you ever get something you just can't get it out of your mind? Just it's lodged in there, and so this is what the sculpture is.
Wow.
And where the scarecrow actually becomes the crow. And so that's.
Yeah, nice.
That's basically the genesis of this. I think it's a very powerful piece.
It is.
So, we've left about 45 minutes for just visiting, and Hibbs, really eager to have conversations with you. If any of you would like to chat with him about any of the works or just get any extra information as to what inspires him, this is the time to do that.
Also, one thing I like to say, I love commissions.
Ah.
No, I love to dialogue with people, come up with an idea, we sit down and we explore. Unfortunately, not to be within my general genre. And I've done.
We've done quite a few.
Quite a few commissions.
Yep,
So
yep.
that is always, you know, if you're an artist, and I'm not speaking for this gallery, but many galleries protect their clientele from the artist. They're worried that the artist will go behind the back of the gallery and deal directly with the patrons. And so I've been in some galleries where I never meet the clients.